morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and other radio stations, and online viewers. I'm Relika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 6, 2019. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, to address you. Minister Johnson.
Members of the press, to those listening via live radio and television or via the internet, and of course to my colleagues in the Council of Ministers, good morning. I begin my opening remarks this morning on a personal note. I believe that the time has come for us as residents of St. Martin to ask ourselves, where do I stand? I say this because as we continue to write the next chapter in the St. Martin story, we will each be confronted with two choices: either to be a part of the solution or part of the hindrance of progress. That day may be many years away, but when your child or children, grandchild or grandchildren, ask you, where were you when it all happened? Or where did you stand back then? Can you look them in their eyes and comfortably say, I stood for St. Martin? In a democracy, there are times when we may individually disagree. But opportunities such as these are the ones that should strengthen our bond. And when the history books are written, I pray it shows a united St. Martin with its people, boasting proudly, I stood for St. Martin. We must show strength and character that allows us to uphold human decency and fundamental rights of our people. Doing this includes protecting them against whatever we see going wrong or goes too far. Why do we continue to wait until it affects us personally? Remember, it can happen in your family. Today, again, I extend my sincere wishes of strength to the family and friends of the Honorable Member of Parliament, Theo Heiliger. Over the past days, the sadness has increased over one of our country's greatest leaders. And though it may seem dark now, know that you are in my thoughts and prayers as we continue to look towards a brighter day. I will continue this morning with some announcements regarding the work of the Ministry of TIAT and the government in general. Following a letter I disseminated on February 27th to the Deputy Executive Assistant Commissioner for Enterprise Services of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, I am happy to report that a delegation for the U.S. preclearance met yesterday with the Council of Ministers to provide an update on the draft bilateral agreement for the establishment of U.S. preclearance at the Princess Juliana International Airport. The delegation fielded questions from the Council of Ministers and provided essential details on the progress being made to date. They will be attending a closed-door session of Parliament this week to update the legislator on the U.S. preclearance and to answer any questions they may have. As I've stated in the past, U.S. preclearance is a critical component of the economic revitalization plan for my ministry and the government of St. Martin. And it is clearly outlined as a priority for the St. Martin United Democratic Coalition. I wish to thank the delegation once again for making this special trip to St. Martin. St. Martin just concluded a week of sailing and races, serious fun during the 39th annual Heineken Regatta. First, I would like to commend the St. Martin Yacht Club for organizing yet another successful Heineken Regatta this year. I also would like to thank the 230 local volunteers who participated this year and made history as the largest group to volunteer in the 39th year of existence and history of the regatta. This clearly shows that the people of St. Martin are fully engaged and are taking ownership of this event, as a St. Martin regatta should be. I also wish to commend the schools and organizations that contributed to the success of the regatta, such as the Milton Peters College, who made tables and garbage bins, Clean St. Martin, who provided recycling services, and I also wish to commend the entrepreneurial initiative of the local businesses that this year provided the sound, the VIP decks, and a stage for the event. This is the first time that the organizers of the St. Martin Regatta were able to source these items locally. A special thanks as well to the business class of the University of St. Martin, who also volunteered. Each year, this event impacts our economy in a very positive way. As the regatta continues to grow, we will be supporting a study to identify, amongst other things, the full impact it has on our local economy. This is a necessary study which will be done this year as we prepare to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Heineken Regatta in 2020. With regards to the public transportation, as Minister responsible of transport, I am aware that the public transportation service on St. Martin is not what it should be. This is an issue every government has struggled with for years. I hear the cry of our community, and I understand their concerns over the lack of access to buses in certain areas. I am happy to report that we have engaged a local company to conduct an extensive research project on the public bus system reform on St. Martin. This research will concentrate on all areas of public transportation, including frequency, route coverage, infrastructure, and a demand for travel patterns. We expect at the end of the 4 months, we will have a solid recommendation on how to completely reform our public transportation system. Very important to note that this research will include all stakeholders, and once it is completed, we will review the findings to look at the strategy and pathway towards the implementation of the recommendations. The gaming industry on St. Martin will receive a wealth of information and will have an opportunity to be a part of the 4th annual Dutch Caribbean Anti-Money Laundering and Gaming Regulation Forum, which will be held here on St. Martin from June 4th to June 7th at the Sonesta Maho Resort. Following my visit to Aruba last year and seeing the importance of such an event, I promised we would host the forum here, as we were looking towards the implementation of our own gaming board. I am happy to report we are in the final stages of preparation for the event. The forum will consist of representatives from the International Governance and Risk Institute, who consult and provide trainings to over 30 countries in both public and the private sector. Our objective is to further sensitize and motivate operators in AML, anti-money laundering. As a country, St. Martin has the opportunity to establish a gaming control board to regulate gaming. This forum brings together people from the banking industry, the gaming industry, and different government representatives from across the region. It provides a unique networking opportunity where we can learn best practices and benefit from the experiences of others. I look forward to everyone concerned participating. Finally, on Tuesday this week, I met with the Canadian Ambassador Sabine Nolok, who expressed her commitment to ensuring an active trade and economic relationship between the Ministry of Tiat and the Government of St. Martin and Canada is established. We had an excellent initial discussion and traded information on economic developments in both countries and spoke briefly about the potential for collaboration on different projects in the not-too-distant future. I wish to thank the Ambassador and her team for visiting our beautiful country, St. Martin, and I look forward to a fruitful and long relationship with the government and people of Canada. At this time, I look forward to any questions from the media, and I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Good day to all who are gathered here. Madam Prime Minister, honorable colleague ministers, the Department of Communications, members of the press, as well as those listening and viewing by radio, television, or social media. Good morning, Sualiga. Last week, the Prince Willem Alexander School celebrated their 45th anniversary since the school was established. The island needed a place of learning for children with special needs and those who required a modified environment for learning instead of the conventional classroom. As we celebrate, we acknowledge that we still have much work to do in public education. And together, as we unite and focus, we certainly will make progress. A visit to NEPA this afternoon. I, along with other members of my cabinet and staff, will be visiting the National Institute for Professional Advancement to meet with the board of the institution and to receive a report on their operations. After reviewing the information that will be presented, I will be able to give an update on their progress. The Phillipsburg Jubilee Library officially opened its doors to the public this past Monday morning in a temporary location on the first floor of the Adolphus Richardson building on the W.G.H. Nisbet Road. Last Friday, the Acting Secretary General, Ms. Shermina Powell Richardson, and myself, we attended the soft opening of the temporary facility, which houses a children's section, a juvenile section with most of the exam books, an adult section, a national history section, a study room, and a computer lab. While the library board is still working on plans for the renovation or reconstruction of their own building, the much valued asset to our community is again accessible to her patrons. I commend the board and staff on their efforts, and I wish them much success. Readers are leaders, and I encourage all, young and old, to visit the library, now just a stone's throw away from their property. The second Caribbean Wellbeing Conference will be held on St. Martin from August 5th through 6th, 2019, under the theme Fostering Resilience, Creating a Culture of Well-Being in Schools. And the focus for the Caribbean Wellbeing Conference will be on teacher well-being, student well-being, and family well-being. The Caribbean Wellbeing Conference is being organized by the Student Support Services Division, the SSSD, also by the St. Martin Youth Council Association, and the St. John's University of New York. Anyone interested in presenting at the Caribbean Wellbeing Conference may submit their proposal by Saturday, March 9th, 2019. For further information about the conference, including the guidelines for submission of proposals, one may visit the Caribbean Wellbeing Conference Facebook page or contact the conference chair and founder, Mrs. Olga Mussington Service, at 543-1235. A career guidance counselors workshop. Career guidance counselors at the Student Support Services Division, SSSD, see many students usually in their last 2 years of high school, and they're pondering what will they be doing next. In some cases, students who have recently graduated have no idea what they want to do or how they want to move forward. Consequently, the SSSD is once again organizing an interactive workshop entitled Choosing a Career or a Study. And this will take place on March 19th, 2019. And it is geared mainly at the above-mentioned individuals. This free workshop will be held at the SSSD's offices from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. So be on time. Persons interested in attending the Choosing a Career and Study workshop on March 9th, 2019 are encouraged to register early for this workshop. Students are also urged to contact the career guidance counselors, Ms. Robin or Mr. Chance, at 543-1235 for more information. On Monday, I had the pleasure of meeting with the Ambassador of Canada to the Netherlands, Mrs. Sabine Nulke, and her team. This was part of her working visit to St. Martin to learn about our government, our cultural heritage, and our education system, and how schools between our countries can be strengthened. We talked specifically about the increase in students applying to attend colleges and universities in Canada, and how St. Martin can negotiate scholarships with individual universities in Canada. We also brought up the issue of our students having to go to Santo Domingo or Guyana to do biometrics in order to be able to be admitted to schools in Canada. The ambassador has promised to pass on our request and this information to see what can be done to accommodate our students who would like to study in Canada. The Department of Public Education has begun accepting applications for the academic year 2019-2020. We're looking for general elementary school teachers as well as for subject teachers for elementary and secondary schools, especially for the vocational technical education school. Educators and teaching assistants who are interested in making their contribution to public education are encouraged to send their applications to the head of the Division of Public Education, Mrs. Gwendolyn Davis, or via email to the following email address, hrsupport@dpesxm.com. Or you can also pick up an application form at the Division Public Education. Please note also that the application forms are online at the government website www.stmartingov.org. As a government, we target the employment of our citizenry first and encourage the return of local professional teachers from overseas. So if you're a trained teacher in the field of education, please apply. Last Friday, 14 newly appointed civil servants in the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport was sworn into office. After pledging themselves to serve, I had the honor of pinning the civil servants with the St. Martin coat of arms. I encourage all civil servants to devote themselves to helping their fellow citizens in their varied capacities. While we, as the Council of Ministers, may be foremost in the limelight, we all are acutely aware of our reliance on the hard-working persons who serve this country, most often in the background. This is teamwork. When we unite and focus, together we can provide better service to the people of our country. Thank you for watching and for listening, and I'll be available for any questions. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Emil Lee, to address you. Minister Lee.
Morning. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues, media here in the House, those listening by radio, television, or internet. Good morning. I have two topics that I'd like to touch on briefly. And actually, both of these topics are related to, let's say, questions or discussions that evolved out of our discussions in Parliament. So I thought that these are points that are really good for the explanation to the general public. One of these is about the different use of terminology regarding health insurance, right? So there was a question raised about the difference between universal health insurance, national health insurance, and general health insurance. Why do we keep on changing these names, and what's the different meaning of them? So universal health insurance is an international concept. There's a WHO, or World Health Organization, definition, which in essence says it is about providing access to all the members of the society to health care without creating financial hardship. So this is a concept, Google it, you can look it up on the internet, a basic concept about what is universal health insurance. And actually this desire to ensure that all the members of the population have health insurance and therefore access to health care is actually a concept, a desire that dates back to Island Council days, so way before 10-10-10 already. And it's a concept that the ministry supports. As Minister of VSA, I believe that it's a basic human right that everyone should have access to health care. In order to do that, they need to have health insurance which provides them the finances to access that health care. So these early concepts of universal health insurance, or the idea of providing everybody access to health insurance, was originally dubbed NHI, or National Health Insurance. So when I began my term as minister, I inherited a process that was already working. In other words, there was already some basic concepts, some preliminary draft legislation, and that was the NHI that I inherited when beginning my term in office. But then through an extensive process of consultation, through a lot of research, so we've met with different stakeholders in the community, we've had a number of sessions, we've attended a number of conferences as to what the rest of the region, what the rest of the Caribbean is doing in terms of solving this very same problem. And through that, our legislative draft has evolved dramatically. So what we have today is very different than what we have when we started. In addition to that, we've received advice from the SARE already, so one of the higher councils of state, and by the end of March, we expect to have the advice from Council of Advice. And based on that, we'll be able to finalize our draft legislation. And so because the legislation that we have now is so dramatically different than where we started, we agreed that calling it NHI was creating a certain misconception in the community, an old conception about what the legislation was. And actually, the technical name for the legislation is General Health Insurance. So that's the evolution of why we've changed from a national health insurance to general health insurance, the GHI, because it is different than what was there before. So I think it's appropriate that there was a change in the name to try and clarify the differences between where we were and where we are. And I've noticed that several entities and several individuals, in one of my interviews with a radio host already, a gentleman was expressing opinions about the general health insurance. But fact is that the draft legislation that we have now has evolved quite a bit, so I don't know. And for example, even Parliament, we haven't submitted any draft legislation to Parliament as yet. So in essence, when we're talking about, can we afford it or not, the question becomes, what basis are we having for that discussion? What legislation are we actually looking at is a real question mark. And so I have a simple request to the community, right? I think we all share the goal that we want everyone to have access to health care. I think in all of our stakeholder consultations, they've agreed that yes, it is a basic human right. The question becomes, how do you fund it? How do you make it financially sustainable? So I ask really that the community just keep an open mind. We encourage feedback, we encourage dialogue. Of course, I prefer constructive criticism. So rather than just, we can't do this. And I think the process has been very interesting for us because it's also given the ministry a very clear task in terms of other points that we need to explain. In other words, we need to do a better job explaining that our current financial system is not working. Continuing with what we have is not an option. Ask our Minister of Finance. He's regularly confronted with the expenses of a healthcare system that's burdening government. So our current system doesn't work. And our general health insurance, we believe, is a solid proposal for a sustainable healthcare system. And if members of the community don't feel that that's the way to go, then provide an alternate solution, right? Not just no, because our current system just cannot continue the way that it is. So I think we all share the goal of access to health care. It needs to be financially sustainable. And again, we've announced, for example, that PAHO will be here, and we encourage members of the community to reach out for consultation. And unfortunately, we haven't received any requests for stakeholder consultations as yet. So, before people form opinions, please engage the ministry. We're happy to do that. The second topic I'd like to touch on, and again, there's some discussions in the community about this increase in the tariffs. So number one, this is related to the SMMC tariffs. So I want to be very clear, first of all, what we did is we set a maximum tariff. There's a discussion legislatively that actually in the changeover from 10-10-10, medical procedures that did not have tariffs in place actually had no maximum tariff. So one of the things we did was establish what the medical tariff is. But people are focused on the percentage of change, and I think instead there was a presentation by the SMMC, and I think it's very relevant for the community to understand this. In 2004, right, so before 10-10-10, we had the St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Curaçao, and we have the SMMC Medical Center. So it was not designated as a hospital, it was designated as a peripheral medical center. And as such, that structure, a structure that's come even from way before the 2000s, was that the rate structure that the SMMC was charging for the exact same services that was provided by the St. Elizabeth's Hospital was substantially and structurally less. I think something like 70% less. So we took an example. We took an example of a lower leg amputation. So we took one procedure and compared the price of what it was in 2004. So in 2004, so exact same procedure, qualified medical specialist, exact same thing, the St. Elizabeth's Hospital was paid 1,750 guilders. And the SMMC was paid 959 guilders and 50 cents. So much less than the St. Elizabeth's Hospital. That same procedure now in the St. Elizabeth's Hospital is 2,123 guilders and 16 cents, right? And with the adjustment of the tariff in the St. Martin Medical Center, it's 1,360 guilders and 50 cents. So the rate that we're paying now with this tariff adjustment is still below what St. Elizabeth's Hospital was collecting for the exact same procedure in 2004. And what this has meant is that the hospital, for all of this time, has been providing services and being compensated at less than what it costs to provide those services. So of course, the hospital had no incentive to increase the range of services that it offered or the frequency of those services it offered, because the more they offered them, the faster that they would lose money. So if we want to have a healthcare institution that's financially sustainable, we need to make sure that they're collecting a fair rate of compensation for their services. And as again, I'll repeat it, the rate that we have now is 36% less than what St. Elizabeth's Hospital collects now, right? So it's dramatically less. And this is partially responsible for, in other words, the adjustment, the fair compensation for services has allowed that we've brought in a urology department as of 2017. We've brought in the eye care department as of 2018. And as of this month, we will be adding orthopedics. They're going to be adding a test phase for neurology and also pulmonology. So what are we doing is, because we are now finally paying a fair rate, the SMMC has an incentive and ability, a financial ability, to add services. So what does this mean to our population? It means that the barriers to care are now being dropped. It means that you can access the care that previously meant that you had to be referred abroad. And those referrals abroad actually means, besides paying for the medical procedure, it means you're paying 2 tickets, 2 airplane tickets, one for the patient, one for a companion. You are paying for the hotel room for the companion and for the patient. Hopefully they were mostly sharing the room. And you are paying per diems, paying for their food, their daily expenses. So all of these costs, when you add it to the medical services, cost the country much more than if we pay a slightly increased tariff to provide those services locally. So when you provide the services locally, that means we don't have all of these travel costs, the hotels, the per diems, and it means that the people are close to home. They don't have to take so much time off of work. They have a family network to support them. So in reality, this is an improvement not only in quality of life, but this is also financially better for the country. And besides that, every dollar that we're spending circulates in our economy instead of exporting it to another country. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin Sogestiu. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Rolaika. Pleasant good morning to all my colleagues, members of the press. Good morning, St. Martin. I have a few announcements this morning. I'll begin. Our country has been challenged with not just natural disasters, but we are pressed on all sides with many social ills, some economic hardships, lack of unity at times, division, deliberate attempts to destroy, promotion of defamation and negativity, and especially during this period of recovery. There is a loud echo, but there's also a silent cry of the people that a change must come to our sweet St. Martin land. This morning, I wish to break down some barriers, which makes us conform to the norm where we await for our spiritual leaders in this community to take the forefront in sounding the alarm that the state of this nation is in. And in my humble opinion, this calls for divine intervention. As I pondered about our nation, I was quickly reminded of the words of the preamble of our Constitution, which states, and I quote, "We boldly affirm that we acknowledge guiding principles of you, our Almighty God, as the core of our values," unquote. With this in mind, I wish to join with the spiritual leaders of the St. Martin United Ministerial Foundation who have called upon my person as Prime Minister to take the lead and to invite the people of St. Martin in observing a day of prayer and fasting. This day of prayer and fasting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 12, 2019. It is a day where we encourage you to stop, to reflect, and to fast, and ask for God's intervention in the many crises or challenges that this country faces. I'm asking you to pray in your homes, at your churches, at your workplace, public area, at schools. Pray wherever you are at. We extend this invitation across the border to our sisters and brothers of the northern side because the gale does not stop at the frontier. What hurts the south hurts the north, and what hurts the north hurts the south. Both sides need this breakthrough, and praying and fasting is one of the best possible spiritual ways to obtain such. People of St. Martin, let us fast and pray for our nation on March 12th. My second announcement, with respect to our recovery efforts, the responsibility for the preparation and the implementation of the projects that are financed by the World Bank and the Trust Fund has been transferred from the Interim Recovery Committee to the National Recovery Program Bureau. In the coming period of the Interim Recovery Committee will continue to support the Bureau in fulfilling this role. Under the leadership of the Director, Mr. Claret Connor, the Bureau has moved to the ground floor of their new office, formerly the Department of Labor, on the Walter J. Nisbet Road as of this Monday. The director has informed me that later this week, the Bureau will have a press conference to provide more detailed information to the public about the status of the different projects, and especially the roof repair program and the airport terminal reconstruction project. Meanwhile, I encourage all interested parties to keep a close eye on the announcements of the tenders. These can be found on the website and the Facebook page of the National Recovery Program Bureau and on the government page in the Daily Herald. My last announcement is that I would like to take this opportunity to wish all women a happy International Women's Day when it comes this Friday, March 8th. I encourage everyone to celebrate the women in their lives. I conclude with the sharing of an encouraging poem in honor of women. It is called Remember Woman by Reese Lever. Remember, woman, you were born, life giver, miracle creator, magic maker. You were born with the heart of 1,000 mothers, open and fearless and sweet. You were born with the fire of queens and conquerors, warrioress, blood you bleed. You were born with wisdom, no wound can you not heal. You were born the teller of your tale, before none you should kneel. You were born with immeasurable soul, reaching out past infinity. You were born to desire with passion, abandon and to name your own destiny. Remember, woman, remember, you are more than you can see. Remember, woman, remember, you are loved endlessly. Remember, woman, your power and grace, the depth of your deep sea heart. Never forget you are woman, divine, as you have been from the start. Thank you. I await your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. The Minister of Finance, the Honorable Perry Hearlings, is present, however, will not be making any opening statements, but is available for any questions the media may have. We now move on to the question and answer session. Alita Singh of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Good morning. Good morning to the Prime Minister, Ministers of the Council. My question is for the Minister of TIAT. You mentioned in your opening statements about the upcoming conference that would be held on St. Martin. I think the most pressing issue for the island for decades now has been the establishment of a gaming control board. Has that made any progress so far?
Thank you, Alita. Excellent question, as it's deeply rooted in our governing program, and of course is the reason for this forum. In September of last year, I attended the third annual Anti-Money Laundering and Gaming Control Board Forum in Aruba. Following that, members of the Ministry of TIAT within the organization attended a follow-up session in Florida, and now we're having our own event with the steps to finalize our own gaming control board, which is indeed deeply rooted in the governing program of this current coalition.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Stephen Cyrillian of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellencies. Good morning. My question is for the Minister of TIAT. How close are you to realizing pre-clearance status for St. Martin?
Thank you, Stephen. An excellent question as well. Of course, for the Ministry of TIAT and government by extension, has already prioritized from the inception U.S. pre-clearance. We have met yesterday with the U.S. pre-clearance committee, members of the airport, as well as with the Council of Ministers. Part of those discussions included some of the pending concerns that had to be addressed within government, matters such as the extension of the concession, which falls under the Ministry of TIAT. Of course, there is the draft bilateral agreement, which will be sent soon in the next few weeks, which will be the first step to really finalizing the process. So indeed, St. Martin is very far along in the process of handling U.S. pre-clearance and bringing it home to St. Martin. I do want to reiterate that it is indeed part of the airport's overall restoration plans. It's part of the economic revitalization necessary for this country. And indeed, when we attend the closed-door session of Parliament, which is slated for today, Wednesday, it is the intention that the members of Parliament are also apprised of the progress of U.S. pre-clearance, the benefits of U.S. pre-clearance, and of course, where U.S. pre-clearance will take St. Martin into the next decades to come.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning. Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to the ministers. Courage, the people of St. Martin presently now are hurting, and their hope is coming. Question to the Prime Minister. Yeah. Over the past years, there was problem about passport. How persons obtain a Dutch passport. For instance, there are some people who come lately, like in 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, obtain a Dutch passport. And the young people of St. Martin who are born here and over 18 years, they are furious. They are saying they have the right to obtain a Dutch passport, and it's difficult for them, and they are very furious. Prime Minister, can you explain to the people the different category how a person obtain a Dutch passport?
Thank you, Lyndon Brown. The different categories, basically, if I can recall, is either you're born of a parent that has the Dutch nationality, so you automatically inherit it. Secondly, if you were born on St. Martin without that, with the parents, then there is a process, but you have to be a legal resident. So that's another process, and then you can go through either the naturalization process, or you can go through the process of option. There are several ways, but you're putting me back into the census office days, and I believe that I will ask the Civil Registry Department to give that information and let the public know the different ways that they can obtain the Dutch nationality. And I do know of the situations that you're talking about those kids that are born here in St. Martin. Some of them are 18 and above now and are looking for the Dutch nationality. There is a process to follow, and we are in actually talks with the Immigration Department in trying to see how we can facilitate that process as well.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andrew Bishop of St. Martin News Online, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Zuleika. Ministers, good morning. Minister Lee, you spoke about the increase in tariffs at the medical center. How much does it cost to send somebody, like, for example, to Santo Domingo or Colombia for medical treatment?
Andrew, I don't have those numbers with me handy, but I certainly do have them. I can show you that the cost comparison is dramatic. I mean, once you add in clearly the travel costs, it just throws everything out of proportion. So I'll send you. We've done a comparison between Dominican Republic and Colombia as well, so you get an idea of what the procedure costs.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister Lee. We now move on to the second round of questions. Alita Singh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Zuleika. I have a quick, before I go into my question, a quick clarification to ask the Minister of TIAT on my earlier question. Minister, you've indicated the importance of the Gaming Control Board, but my question more had to do with how far along is the process to establish it? Have we found members? Do we have the physical structure in place for it? So that's my clarification. I think that's more what I was asking for.
Thank you, Alita. And of course, to go in depth in where we are, no, we do not have members identified for the Gaming Control Board. What we're looking, of course, as in the confines of how the structure would look, the discussion in terms of what do we want and how far do we want to go in terms of regulating the gaming industry on St. Martin. So that's why I made mention of before the reason for the forum, that we apprise everyone, the different stakeholders, of what the type of regulations would call for and what is possible, and then from there the structure and the nominations for a gaming control board could continue.
Okay, thank you. And now my question is for the Minister of Finance. We're almost to the end of the first quarter of 2019. Could you give us an update on the budget 2019?
Thank you, Alita, for that question. Good morning to my colleagues and the press corps. As we speak, the budget 2019 is on its way to House of Parliament for debating and approval. We finalized it is a revised budget. what will be done. The older version that was submitted in November last year will be retracted and be replaced by the revised budget. So in essence, the budget is shortly ready for debating in Parliament. And maybe additional, Alita, you might recall that we had a difference of vision on the expenses on the budget between the government of St. Maarten and CFT. We had an amount for the expenditures of 503 million, and according to an advice from the CFT, should have been 475. The Kingdom Council of Ministers still approve the previous budget with the condition: go sit and talk with one another and see where you end up with. We managed to lower, in accordance to that decision of the Kingdom Council of Ministers, and if I'm not mistaken, right now we end up at 478 million as expenditures for Country St. Maarten in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. Stephen Cyrillian, you have the floor.
Thank you. If I may get the attention of the Minister of ESA. PAHO recently announced that, in fact, they warned the Caribbean of a possible outbreak of dengue. I'm sure you have taken note of that as the Minister of Health. What is St. Maarten doing now to ensure that in case of a outbreak of dengue, that we are well prepared to deal with the situation?
Thanks, Stephen. I think that since Hurricane Irma, the ministry has been extremely concerned about the conditions for mosquito breeding. So this is already wrapped up in one of the World Bank projects, is about a debris cleanup. So from the ministry's perspective, we have had concerns, ongoing concerns, that the debris that's still around the island from post-Irma are providing excellent breeding sites for mosquitoes, as well as many of the damaged homes also are providing excellent breeding sites for mosquitoes. So in that sense, the ministry's been sort of prepared for possible mosquito-borne related diseases. So they have their protocols in place, but unfortunately we are sort of expecting, or prepared for, let's say, a possible outbreak from that perspective. But again, it goes back to educating the public, do what they can to reduce the mosquito breeding sites. That is clearly the most effective, is prevention. But the ministry is prepared and ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Lee. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Good morning again to the ministers, and question to Minister Smith. And we are focusing on NIPA. Minister Smith, do you aware of NIPA has 1 more year and then the funding will run out? Do the government of St. Maarten have any discussion about funding NIPA and keep it running for at least 20 more years?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for your question. That's a surprise to me that funding is running out at NIPA, because NIPA falls under the subsidized schools, and so every year NIPA submits a budget, and based on their budget, funding is offered to them, subsidy, finances is offered to them yearly based on their budget. So I'm not sure where that information comes from, but they are subsidized and their funding, as far as subsidy, is not running out.
But
Thank you, Minister Smith. Andrew Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, I have one question. We've noticed that some of the boat wrecks in the lagoon have been removed, but there are still notable some that remains in the lagoon. Have you notified the owners as yet, and are they going to be fined for having the wrecks in the lagoon until now?
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I believe the wreckage removal from the Simpson Bay Lagoon is still ongoing, and I'm sure that's part of the process. I will ask, however, an update from the team to ensure if one of the procedures is fined, issuing fines. I believe in some of the preliminary discussions we did speak about that, but I believe that has already been passed, because we looked at those boats that were insured, those that weren't insured, and I believe the ones with the fines are the ones that weren't insured, but the question was, how do we find the owners as well? So it's an ongoing project, but I will ask for an update so that I can share with you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the third round of questions. Alita, you have the floor.
Thanks again, Rolika. My question is for the Prime Minister. Could you give an update on the establishment of the Integrity Chamber, in particular the appointment of the supervisory board and the other boards that need to be in place? At the moment, we have the quartermasters, but we don't have the two-tier structure of members that are necessary.
Indeed, Alita, you are quite correct. But a correction, there are no more quartermasters. They are actually members. We are just waiting for the appointment of one more on the first level. And on the second two tiers, indeed, we are taking in applications right now, or surveys from individuals in the community that are interested in sitting on the boards. And I know at least 3 have come to my office already, and those will be sent to the St. Martin's representative, Mr. Boseman, where they will then do the interviews of those individuals.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen, you have the floor.
Mr. Johnson, you mentioned that St. Martin will be playing host to the Game Industry Conference. When exactly will the conference be held, and what of location?
Thank you, Stephen, for your question. The conference will be held from June 4th to June 7th at the Sonesta Maho Beach Resort. Of course, the intention of the conference, as I made mention of to your colleague in the press corps, is to bring forth the regulation of the gaming industry on St. Martin. It's of paramount importance that the Ministry of TIAT finalizes this process. I know it has been even mentioned as a budget post in terms of addressing the gaming industry. We intend to make full use of that budget post during my tenure as Minister in charge of TIAT. And of course, the ministry itself has been making steps towards the finalization and the realization of having this industry fully regulated. So I do also wish to take this opportunity to thank all those within the ministry who have actively participated thus far in seeing us reach this stage, to continue with those efforts, as indeed we are finalizing and will finalize this important step for our country.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Yes, Minister Smith, there will be a meeting at NIPA, so you can bring words to us later on. But my question will be to the Prime Minister. The Minister Andre from Holland, there was a discussion about the prison, and he stated that St. Martin, at the Justice Office here in St. Martin, responsible for the rebuilding and servicing of the prison. He also mentioned that presently now it is unhealthy, even unsafe to bring back prisoners from Holland, because and the emphasis is they will finance, and they will oversee. So can you, the Minister of Justice is not here today, but can you, you might have heard that statement, but can you make it clear to the people of St. Martin who is really responsible for the prison and who finance the prison upkeeping time to time?
I'm going to correct you. It's not, I think you meant the Member of Parliament, Andre Busman, not Minister. Okay. There is a joint responsibility, and I can speak on behalf of St. Martin that the Minister of Justice is doing everything within his power, and at least with the resources that he has, to ensure that the prison has an action plan to clean up the areas that need to be cleaned, restore where needs to be restored, but remember we do have budget constraints. So indeed, at least for St. Martin is taking its responsibility in ensuring that the prisoners that are there are safe with the limited resources that we do have. I think that has been expressed several times, and the matter does not change. Should we get extra monies, then it will be great, so that we can either build a new prison. I'm told that in actuality we really need a new prison and not a refurbished, or I'm looking at the Minister of Finance, he's probably like, but indeed someone said to me, I don't remember the date, but in the conversation I had, they looked at how old the prison was and it's time for a new prison. But the fact is we just don't have the monies for such as right now. We have been in negotiations and talks with the Netherlands, so it's an ongoing discussion. And I must state that we do have the Voorgangscommissie that gives an update, periodically as to the conditions of the prisons and the things that the Ministry of Justice need to do to ensure that there are improvements. But I must state that the Minister of Justice has been quite adamant in ensuring that with the limited resources that he has, and there are actually, as we speak, there are repairs being done right now to the prison, but we must look at it in its totality. Do we need just repairs and restructuring, or do we really need just an entire new facility that can hold our prisoners?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andrew Bishop, you have the final question.
Thank you very much. Minister of Finance, in March, I would like to know if there's an extension on the number plates, the purchasing of the number plates now.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Are you really asking me that question? I mean, look, we have seen all these long lines in front of the building here. We have seen long lines in Simpson Bay. And not only myself, but when I talk to people in the street, everybody's saying the same thing, Why are we waiting till the last moment? So why should the government then, because of that, every year come with an extension? We need the money. Everybody needs to be obliged and pick up his responsibility. For right now, no, there is no extension. I guess those who are coming in still, have to dodge the bullet if the police are stopping them on the street. But for now, no, there's no extension. Just, I would like to stress to the community, we really need that income. You need to be in compliance with the law. Do your duty as a citizen to country and people. It is your risk to be on the road without proper documentation. And that's all I have to say on it, Mr. Bishop. But thank you very much for this very nice question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 6, 2019. For rebroadcast, tune in every evening at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at www.stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach, and do have a pleasant day further.